Hello, everyone. Welcome to eBizChat, where it is all about business. I'm Riggs Zanotti, and I'm joined today by Dr. Susan Nash. And we always call her magical. That's our latest term for her. She's magical. And joining us today is also Harold Mugliotti. He's our video producer, and he's also co-hosting. So he's a co-host or something like that. It's like a Cocoa Pop? I don't know. Here we go.
This show is sponsored by Relate Corporation. Visit us at www.relatecasts.net. Thanks.
We are back.
I was just thinking maybe it's like Coco the Gorilla. I've got to learn to do sign language now.
In today's day and age, that could be risky. So you just gave the signal to cancel. Uh-oh. Anyway. Well, last week we've had Dr. Ed on. He's our favorite economist, and he's always fun, and he's always good. But, we were talking a lot after the show that, we didn't agree with everything he was saying on some of the stuff he said. And so, we don't usually get into too much of a discussion on the show, but we thought some of the points we would either refute or give a different version of. Like, for example, in the area of energy and power and oil and gas, our Dr. Susan, the magical one over there, she actually knows a lot about that because she works, well, for one, she works with the American Association of Petroleum Geologists. She's very familiar with all of the goings-on in the industry. She is a geologist as well as an economist. So we've got a double. Actually, if you're an economist and a geologist, does that mean if you don't like the charts, you throw a rock at it and it's over? I'm just curious. I just thought about that. But anyway,
before I jump from a rock.
That's right. Anyway, but you have a very good background in both of those, and you have a lot of extensive experience, not only in what geology is and how it works and what it's used for, but also the very practical applications of geology and oil and gas and just about everything else that it entails. But you've worked with some of the top scientists and engineers in those areas. So you know the good and the bad. You know that we've had layoffs, that it's been a tough industry the last couple of years. But you also know that certain things are not going away anytime soon, like coal. And one of the things Dr. Ed said is coal is dead, it'll be gone. And I think he's totally wrong. I think you agree with that. Our coal plants are pretty clean right now. I'd say they're as green as can be, but they, for the most part, give off water vapors. It's not like what it was 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's a lot of pressure for coal to change. Mm-hmm. And I used to work for Kerr-McGee Chemical or Kerr-McGee Corporation, and they had a coal part of it. And I went to the mines in Wyoming. And it's interesting that one of the things that you have to do in coal mining is file a reclamation plan before you even dig the first spadeful of dirt. And it's getting to that point where it really should be that way for everything. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, coal is where it's used. It's under incredible regulation. It has to be clean. It has to be emission free, and they have scrubbers, et cetera. In fact, a lot of the carbon capture and utilization and storage captures at least the CO2 coming from coal plants. And then what we don't hear about is the fact that China is still has a all energy policy, and so does India. So
and
I
China's
just don't
plants are not brand new.
And same with Russia.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's why I keep saying all of this is really political in nature and nothing else. There's not much science involved in it. It's a lot of politics.
Well, and one thing I was wondering about coal was I remember when we had John Hofmeister on, he talked a little bit, but didn't get super in depth into carbon capture and sequestration from coal. How advanced is the technology on that? Are we to the point where we can take most of the particulate and stuff from flue gases and that kind of thing, and basically sequester them into materials that can be used for something else, like he was sort of describing in that interview?
Yes. So CCUS stands for Carbon Capture, Utilization, and Sequestration. And back in 2008, I wrote with a team, we wrote a proposal, and we received a contract from the U.S. government to provide training, and it was like a $5 million grant to give training and on that topic. Well, unfortunately, it was 2008, 2009, and the government incentives were discontinued. So there was actually no interest in it whatsoever. So things kind of stopped, and they actually canceled the grant after 2 years. So that was it was a contract. That was disappointing. But at any rate, what has happened is that the CO2 would come from industrial sources and then be put into either pumped underground and stored underground, which you have to know a lot about geology to keep it from inducing earthquakes and leaking out, or it's pumped through in pipelines and injected into old oil and gas fields to increase the to stimulate production again. So basically that's how it works. But what we lack right now are the pipelines that are capable of doing that, because it takes huge investment.
And of course, pipelines, again, political issue, they're being blocked, stopped, closed for no real reason other than the politics of quote unquote green energy versus what they consider non-green. It's very interesting because if you think about it, coal is as green as anything else. It comes from the ground. It's, so it is green technically. We want to get into semantics.
Well, I mean, if it's not scrubbed, it's ugly. It's true.
Yeah,
I mean, all you have to do is look at satellite photos of China, especially before they started putting scrubbers on their coal plants, and then they actually use coal in their homes. Still.
Interesting.
Or not homes, in their apartments. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have seen some of the pictures from the satellites of the pollution in China. It's mind-boggling. I don't know if it's gotten much better. These pictures aren't that old, some of them. And they had a lot of coal plants, tons. And it's
gotten better.
Yeah, and they don't really follow any environmental standards. Maybe they're starting to now, but they don't really care. I don't know about India either. They were pretty similar.
And one thing I've heard about China's coal generation is that I'm not sure. I don't know too much about this, so I may be speaking a bit off here. But from what I've heard, the coal deposits they have in China are a little lower grade than what we tend to use here, and therefore have a little more that they would have to pull out. Is there truth to that, or is that kind of?
Yeah. Okay. Anthracite is the top. And it has the most BTUs, and then you've got bituminous coal, and then lignite's the lowest, and that's kind of like sticks and twigs. And there's a lot of organic matter that's not basically hydrocarbon.
Yeah, not directly useful for energy generation. That's in that stuff, right?
Yeah, and while we're not trying to get too technical in the show, it's more about the cost for business right now. Coal is a lot cheaper than a lot of the green. And a lot of the green, even in California where we are, they're realizing it can't handle the loads. They can't generate enough of it to handle. We have almost 40 million people in California. Though I don't know how many have moved out in the last year and a half. Quite a few, but I still think, let's say we're 39 million, we're 38. We still have a lot of millions of people. Green can't do it. They're not even close to being, wind generation, solar maybe, but solar isn't as effective or as efficient yet as it could be. There's carbon nanotubes that they're talking about in paint and stuff. Not there yet. Not in any major form. Coal just hasn't. I mean, not coal, but green, quote unquote, hasn't yet done it. People have such a short memory. Go back about 14 years, and you've got Solyndra. Remember that one? How much money was wasted on these, government money wasted on these green companies? Every one of them went under and took all the money with them. So was that for real, or was that a scam? I'd say scam. But that's
that was definitely. Yeah, I would say that. But like, I was just in a meeting actually right before this one, and we were talking about geothermal. And then talking about the new policies and how many companies are going for geothermal. But it's not the geothermal that you think of as like Iceland or Yellowstone or California, where it's near volcanics or rift zones. What it really is it's using the geothermal gradient and going in and using old wells, like oil and gas wells.
Right.
But they're talking about we're still not there yet in terms of the cost, and in order to really make it work, we have to have combined solutions. So we'll combine natural gas, for example, with something else, with solar, so we need all of the above. We can't just go all to solar panels because, frankly, there aren't enough critical minerals on the earth to create that. And when I mentioned it to Ed, he goes, "Well, we'll be innovative." We can be, but there's some lag time. And so what we have is what we have.
And on the geothermal also, one, how safe in the long run and how cost effective.
Well, geothermal can cause earthquakes. There's no question at all.
That's why I was saying how safe. That is a little spooky. Now, what is fracking considered?
Okay, so people don't understand fracking, and this is like kind of what makes me pull my hair out. Okay, so the way that geothermal would cause earthquakes is because of the injection, and you just have to make sure that when it is injected, the pressures are balanced, and they can do that. They just have to plan and monitor. And so in fracking, there are two different things when people call it demonize fracking. I know that there are a lot of downsides to fracking, and I'm well aware. I'm not a fan of the way that it can be done, but
you're well aware, huh?
Nice.
No pun intended.
But at any rate, so the way that you distracted me. So
Sorry.
The first thing about fracking is, and it's been done for 70 years now, is they used to call it shooting a well. That you would put nitroglycerin down, and in fact, people used to have horse-drawing carts, and they would be the nitro carts, and the drivers would be paid a lot because it was rather risky, and every certain percentage would have like a little surprise, and they were so explosive. Got more controlled, but what they would do is they'd lower explosives down the well, and then where you've got the zone that has oil trapped in the pore space, you just put a charge down there, blow it up, and create all these fractures, and then the oil would flow through it. And so that was the original kind of like fracking or completing the well, and this and they used to call it shooting the well. Now that's for a vertical hole, but then now with the horizontal wells, you could have them, they go off 2 or 3 miles, and then they're all in that one zone that produces. So imagine the amount of, and they don't use nitroglycerin anymore. They call it hydraulic fracturing because what they do is they put water in there and put it and pressure it up. So they pressure it up so much that it breaks the rock. And so that in itself doesn't really do much, except you do have frac fluid and you have the sand and stuff that's putting there that props open the little fractures. But where the big problem is, and this is what causes a lot of the induced seismicity and issues, is where you got once you open up 5 miles of rock that's flowing fluid into the hole, then you got to do something with it. And not all of that fluid is oil. It might be 10%, 5% oil. But 90% of that's produced water. You can't drink it. Even if it's salty, it has stuff in it like arsenic. So, so they pump it down into wells to dispose of it, and that's where the problem comes in. Where you have hundreds of wells producing that kind of volume of fluid, and I was like, people have said for years, "Good grief, why not purify this water and send it to drought-stricken places through a pipeline?" And they could. It's just a matter of cost.
Interesting.
And the cost of reclaiming the water isn't that cheap either.
Right.
They have that problem in California where they reclaim a lot of water. It's expensive.
Yeah.
So it's not the fracking itself, it's the disposal of the additional water that actually causes the problems that people think of. Okay.
And the fracking hasn't produced large earthquakes. I think for the most part they've been pretty small. But it has produced earthquakes in areas that haven't had earthquakes.
Well, I'll tell you that the producing the water and injecting it, those do create earthquakes, and there can be a lot of them, and they can start crumbling your bridges, and so nobody really wants that,
Okay.
and cracking your houses and making your tall buildings shudder.
Yeah. Now, have there been issues with that, or they have been strong enough?
Yeah.
They have.
Yes, and there were so many of them. I mean, this is before the price collapsed and people stopped producing so much. We would have 2 or 3 a week that were between the 3 and 4.5.
4.5's pretty big. Yeah.
It was.
Well,
yeah.
they say you don't really feel them much until about 3. At 3, you'll
you can
feel
definitely
it.
feel them.
At 1.5, 2, not so much. Maybe it'll. A truck going by in an office building will feel maybe like a 1 or 2 sometimes, just by shaking the foundations. But 3 you can feel, and 4 is pretty strong. 5 is definitely strong, and so yeah, that'll definitely make a difference. Now, what are the Canadians doing with fracking? I thought they do a lot in the Alberta area, or are they just fracking in very undeveloped places?
There's some fracking, and they are fracking in undeveloped places. And I just want to say that one of the ways to avoid the induced seismicity is to have a very tightly controlled plan for injecting. Okay. So that instead of injecting everything in one place and making it off balance, they load balance. So then they keep from having those stress buildups. In Canada, the industry has been pretty much decimated, so there isn't any activity in things that would be fracked. What they have is they do open pit mining at their tar sands, and so that's a whole different.
Now, is open pit mining is that the same as strip mining?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and so basically, what they'll do is they just have it, and then they have to melt it and process it. And
How much of what's going on with fracking and with coal, for that matter, do you think is political versus any other reason?
Well, okay. I think what's going on, some of it's real, and there need to be watchdogs, and there can be abuses.
Yeah.
So, no doubt. But I'd say that what's really going on right now is Leopold II of Belgium reborn. Do you remember Leopold II of Belgium had studied, he wanted an empire. He was just a relative of Victoria, and I think he was a nephew, and he just so wanted to have an empire, Belgium to have an empire. So he studied and studied what to do, and he figured it out. He said he personally bought in the 1870s and 80s enough of Africa so it was the size of Europe, personally owned it. And then he got away with that personal ownership by claiming that what he wanted to do is bring Christianity into, quote, civilize Africa. But he wasn't doing that at all. What he was doing is cutting the hands off people who didn't get enough rubber and burning down villages when they didn't produce their quotas and horrifically abusing. But everybody said, "Oh, the missionaries, everything's wonderful," and then the exact same thing is happening in the Congo now, but it's with cobalt and with the minerals that we use for batteries.
Right.
But the same narrative. Oh, we're saving the planet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's political, in other words.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because religious, political tend to go hand in hand nowadays.
You know, when you were talking about the using nitroglycerin to shoot the wells, it's sort of related, but that just kind of reminded me of that thing that happened in Uzbekistan in the 60s, where there was this a natural gas well, right, that had caught fire, and it just kept burning, and they couldn't put out the fire for, I don't know, I think it was months or something like that. And what they ended up doing was drilling a hole next to it and putting a nuclear bomb down there and detonating the nuclear bomb to kind of like pinch the gas well next to it shut. Which I guess worked, but it was just an interesting way to do things because I guess they had tried a lot of other things.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing about it, too, is that I think that once we can show that we can have clean solutions, and because nobody wants to pollute the air, water, etc., and we can do what we can to to be responsible, I think that things will be better. But I mean, there are so many things that are happening that are hard to really put a handle on. I mean, for example, how much energy is used in the kind of industrial agriculture that's being used. I mean, it'd be very useful to take a look at.
Yeah, exactly. Because that is a huge, industrial agriculture. It's a huge consumer of energy and of water, and because like we have droughts all the time here in California, but we have a huge amount of agriculture, and that's something people say, oh, turn off your lights, turn off your air conditioning, but the big user of energy and of water. When we have droughts, they'll say don't wash your car, but it's mainly agriculture actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing too about some of these arguments is that they're kind of to do what we're claiming we want to do is to condemn the majority of the people living on the earth to a life of misery.
Sure.
If we just keep them in, we call it energy poverty, and it's just not fair to not let some people. I mean, just not fair to block them from having access to energy because somebody's decided that they can't have it because it's not correct.
Well, and going back again to the when we had John Hofmeister on, I liked, speaking of condemnation, one of the things I liked, that one of the points he made was that in the energy industry, a lot of people are engineers and scientists and that sort of thing. And when you have this policy of basically giving people slaps on the wrist or condemning them for doing things and trying to make them into the bad guy, rather than saying this is a problem, we need a solution, can you help us come up with a solution, how do we fix this, and trying to work with them that way, these types of people are not going to respond well. Like
that's the role of propaganda, where you always divide, conquer, make bad guys out of one thing, and you change narratives to whatever's convenient to whatever regime is in power. That's just propaganda. Whether it's science, whether it's religion, whether it's philosophy, art, whatever, there's always some vested interest to change something or to manipulate it or whatever else. And that hasn't changed. And I don't know if it'll ever change. Maybe. If we ever become an enlightened society, then maybe. But I don't know. I think we're far away from that yet. It would be nice. The Elysian Fields are nowhere near us at this point. So...
yeah. In fact, I wonder what you think, Rick, about this. Okay, so Thomas Kuhn wrote The Structure of Scientific Revolutions in, I think, 1962. And that was right at the same time as the Frankfurt School of Philosophy. And they were doing they were Marxists, but then they were kind of post-Marxists. But their whole concept was I think Berger and Peter Berger. Anyway, different people were doing things on the social construction of reality. The idea that we perceive based on, first of all, what the hegemonic forces tell us that is real, and if they don't agree with it, and they use Copernicus and Galileo as examples, then you get to spend some time in solitary confinement,
well, that
writing your epicness.
Re-education camps, but no, that is something that's been done forever. And once we've mastered the art of propaganda, whatever that may be, and social manipulation, I mean, look at behavioral psychology with Skinner. It's pretty easy to make somebody do what you want them to do in a sick and pretty perverted way. It's not a healthy version of psychology. Let's just put it that way, because it can be very violent, it can be very upsetting, and that's just one way of controlling people. When you start controlling, like you said, the meme, controlling, anything that's not labeled green is bad. Well, why? First of all, define green and then define what's bad. And they can't. Well, green, or it's all about global warming. Well, okay. But we have global cooling, probably more than global warming right now. So then they go, okay, well, let's call it global change, climate change. Climate change is every day. Sorry, guys, but it's a daily occurrence. Sometimes you have a hotter summer, sometimes you have a colder one. We have not taken enough data throughout the years, no matter what fakes, PowerPoints say, to prove anything. We don't know what the temperature was 400 years ago on any given day. It's just made up. There's a lot of made up stuff, and so you just go, okay, what is the reality? It's what people are making of it, or actually it's what the powers that be are manipulating to make people see a point of view. And then, of course, then you've got the media, which pushes it. And by the way, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I just look at the facts and look at what's going on, and you can tell what's what, what's this, what's that. It's so obvious in many cases, not in all cases. But I just see a lot of propaganda going on everywhere. There's always a push for something. And when people say it's the science, they know nothing about science. At that point, you know that you're in trouble. If a politician tells you it's scientific, they don't know what science is. Believe me, they don't teach science to political science students. Not really.
And talking, and jumping back to like what you were mentioning at the beginning about not quite agreeing with everything that Ed said.
Yeah.
He was saying, well, energy is going to get cheaper and cheaper. I don't think so.
No.
And I think that we need to start thinking about the fact that electricity is going to be permanently more expensive, and also transportation will be, and that will be highly inflationary. And so what will that do to the global economy, and what will that mean for a lot of countries, especially those that are battling energy poverty and they can't progress? I mean,
well, the two worst continents would be Africa and South America. Though they're at the rate they're going, they have some good countries there, but they have a lot of poverty already, and no signs of them getting any better. You've got parts of Asia which aren't doing all that well. You've got some strong countries and a lot of weak ones. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of poverty, and there's going to be a lot of dying and lack of food and everything else that's going to happen in those countries. And you're right, energy isn't. I don't think it's going to get any cheaper at all. There's not going to be someone like a Tesla who says we should have free power for everybody. Look what happened to him when he came up with that one. It's not going to happen. There's too many vested interests, and that's that's where Ed said something wrong the other day too, when he was talking about vaccines. How great it was that the vaccine is saving the world. From what? That's my first question. From what? Because what the vaccines are are doing, they weren't needed because there were enough medical treatments already that would have gotten rid of any pandemic that existed at that moment. I'm not saying a future one, but at least at that moment. So there's a lot of vested interests, and so we're seeing some very illogical stuff going on. And when you start breaking through the veils of complete zaniness and illogic and lunacy that we're seeing, then you just see greed, a lot of money being manipulated in some really strange philosophies. That's about all you can say.
If we look at Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and we take a closer look, we can say, okay, they had phenomenal growth, economic growth for a 15-year, 20-year period on the gross, but economic inequality has been exacerbated. So that, and then also who has access to anything, and even like those slums, they're expensive to live in because just a tiny number of people, because of corruption, control things. And then you've got countries or entities that are going in and controlling their natural resources, similar to what Leopold wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so then, if you really want people to have a middle class and they have access to education and apply it and have a better standard of living, it has to start with clean energy, clean air, clean water, and that's for everyone.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it, but that's what you have to have.
Yeah. And if you go at the social structure level, you need honest judiciaries. You need laws that apply to everyone, not just the people. The politicians should also live by the same laws, no exceptions. So that's all the stuff that's just basic common sense of a country. You talk about equality. I love the government who always talks about inequality. Now, during our pandemic, what was the most unequal of all the things going on? People were losing jobs. People were losing businesses. How many government employees lost a job? Just about none.
That's a good point.
Just about none. How many lost salaries? Just about none. So we, the people who are paying for their salaries, are losing our jobs. Just a point of what's going on. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And it's not the way it has been because, since when does a government have the right to tell anyone, you're essential and you're not? So you're telling me every government employee is essential, but every person who's actually producing anything isn't. Good point. That's a scary kind of way we're heading. And, I have nothing against government workers, by the way. A lot of them do very good, hard work. We've worked with the government. There's some great people in government. But government doesn't produce anywhere near what companies produce. Not on the whole. The nature of government is bureaucratic. It gets in the way of itself many times. And the thing is, that's just one of the insanities of what's going on right now. So you've got the government playing favorites with everyone and everything. Like they say, I've heard this many times, the bigs are getting bigger and everybody else is getting very small. That's a scary proposition. That's kind of what we have anti-monopoly laws all about. And, we're not consistent in the application of our laws. That's something that over the last, I'd say 20 years or so, we're seeing more and more. Probably even longer than that, but we're seeing it more and more as the years go by. I'm seeing it more and more. I lived under a dictatorship for 3 years once, so I'm seeing us becoming very close to some of that. And that's that to anybody who's come from countries or has lived in countries where they've been and seen a dictatorship, we're seeing signs of it here, and that's scary. Just a point.
Yes, it's very scary, and I don't know where things are going. I'm fundamentally optimistic about
Same here.
creativity.
Yeah, I think, most humans are good. Everything. You have probably 95 is okay, and then you got 5% a little tweaked. But, I think I'm optimistic too, but we have to get back to a level playing field, and we're far from it right now.
Oh, I totally agree. We have to give more people access and in a meaningful kind of access, not just placating us with tokenism.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. Well, we are actually just about, well, we're way past out of time, but that's okay. I
Well,
told
no,
you
we started a tad late.
we
so
started a little bit
we're
late.
not
And she's
actually
magical.
that-
She controls our
yeah.
clock, so there's nothing we can do about that. Anyway, well, Susan, that was fun. Harold, same thing. And that was well done when we were talking about fracking. Very well done.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I hope it was clear, because I think that's one area where people don't quite understand.
See, I just used
Yeah,
that same...
I think a lot of people don't actually know what's
No,
going on there.
no. People just read the papers. Fracking, it's horrible. But they don't know why. It's just a lot of made up stuff. There are bad things about it, like you said, but there's also good things, and technology is working to make it better. But
Exactly. I mean, you can be electrocuted by high tension wires,
that is true.
but we build it so that we try to keep it safe.
Right. And in new construction, it's all done underground, which is nice. But anyway, well, thanks again for sharing and going through these things, because there's many alternate points of view. I love Dr. Eddie. He really does a good job on things.
Oh, yeah.
But there's certain things we don't agree with him on. And if we have more time, we can have a good discussion on it. But a lot of times now, when we take him into the realm of Russia and other things, he's quite brilliant. He knows a lot about that, and he analyzes it very well. But again, there's so many things happening out here that we just say, well, yeah, maybe, but not quite. And we can all agree to disagree. In a civil society, what do we do? Yeah.
And I know I'm totally okay with being wrong. It's just that from my perspective, I see things a little bit differently.
Sure. Same here. All right. Well, thanks again for watching. If you guys have any questions, comments, or have any hitmen coming our way, please let us know so we can prepare. And we will see you all next week next week we're going to have a great show. Talk about green technology. We've got Rob Weber. He is the CEO of HARP, H-A-R-P, Renewables. That's cool technology. When you see it, we've got some videos we're going to show during the show. It's mind-boggling. They're doing what everybody's been trying to do for years, but they're actually doing it in one night, overnight. It's pretty amazing. It's very cool stuff. Oh, you'll love this one, Susan. It's pretty amazing. And the result of what they do with human waste, plastics, all sorts of cardboard, garbage, just everything in one night. Stay tuned for the show next week. I think you folks will be very, very interested in what will happen with waste management in the future. Very interesting.
Nice.
Have a good one, everyone. We will see you next week on eBizChat. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.